Dear Converse, today we are entering the second day of our retreat, which is supposed to be on Tuesday. Yeah, no matter we are participating for the summer or Christmas, it should be Tuesday for the talk today. So we would like to give the floor to Father Joe.
Okay, thank you and welcome back. Yesterday, I gave, in the first two talks, a bit of the history so you can understand something about Francis and his family, his parents, who were really interesting people. And I also told you yesterday that he's the first one to go through a process of beatification. That'll be really interesting for us because it's from the testimony of the neighbors. Francis died when he was 55 years old, but his father lived into his 80s. His mother was quite elderly too when she died. So, sometimes we look back to that age and say, oh, people did not live long. Well, and Francis's brothers all lived into their 80s as well. So people lived long, but he worked very hard, and this is what wore him out, and it destroyed his health in a certain sense. And people made a lot of demands on him. He was always generous to respond, even though it physically even hurt him to respond. So just so you understand that, but also understand for us, when he died, and they thought they could get the new bishop to declare him a saint, and Rome would say yes. But Rome was not saying yes, because the new Pope, Pope Urban VIII, in 1523, so just a few months after Francis died, said, no, to have saints, we need to have a process of beatification. Now, let me tell you something about the word process. I don't know what word you use in Mandarin or Cantonese, but the word process in English sounds industrial. A process. You process food, you process chemicals, okay? It's an industrial word. But in Latin, the word processus means trial. So when Pope Urban VIII said we need a beatification process, he's not talking about a technique. He's talking about a trial, a court case. And so what are we trying? The servant of God, did he live virtue to an authentic degree, to an heroic degree? Was he a hero in Christian virtue? So Pope Urban says this, and they go, oh no, how do we do this? Well, they need to put together a committee, a panel. And so they chose 3 bishops on the panel, and then they brought in people who knew Francis and to give testimony, like in court. And so they came up. Where was the courtroom? The courtroom was the Church of the Visitation. And right in front of the altar, they put the table, and the 3 bishops sat there, and then in came the people who knew Francis. Now, since he died at the age of 55, actually, people who knew him when he was a baby were alive. That's how we got those stories of, I know that God loves me because my mommy loves me. Who would remember that of an old man, except people who knew him when he was a baby, who said those things? In fact, people who were interviewed, one was the neighbor who helped his mother to nurse him, to feed him, to take care of him in those first months in the first 2 years. Her name was Petramard, and she gave testimony. It was very interesting testimony that she gave. And she tells us what the family was like. And so this is how we know everything about the family. Now, she's very enthusiastic because they tell her we're seeing if he's a saint. And he says, oh, yes, he was the holiest baby that I ever took care of. I knew he was a saint as I was rocking him to sleep. Come on. Anyway, she had 8 children. So I think her children were full of mischief. I mean, this Francis was very sweet. And so she, oh, he's a saint. Well, no, that doesn't count, Petramard. That's not the testimony. But what's worth it in her testimony is What was the family like? What was the mother like? How did she raise him? What was the father like? How did he raise him? What were the uncles and aunts? Because Francis lived with them. What were his cousins like? What was the household like? Because she lived right close by. A 5-minute walk across the field, and she was there. So she knew the family. And this is what's really interesting, is people from his infancy were giving testimony. Servants in the household gave testimony. And then people who knew him in secondary school, who knew him at university, who knew him as a missionary, they all gave testimony. So this was pretty interesting kind of thing, because with him dying young at 55, there were many people who were his age or a little younger or a little older who could tell us what it was like. Excuse me. So we're going to look at the thing. And for Francis, remember, he's going to be, the trial will be, what was it about virtue? And Francis actually talked a lot about virtue. So we want to look at those virtues and say, what's in there that Francis tells us about virtue? So let me bring in something. I want to give you some key words of what it's like to understand Francis's life. Let's see how this works. There it is. Okay. See, start here. Okay, here we go. So core elements, we could say. So what are some key words that Francis uses that would become then elements that go to the heart of being Salesian? Now, you may say, why do we talk about Francis de Sales as Salesian? Because his name is Salesius in Latin. So he is the first Salesian. And we'll see that that Don Bosco will look to him for this sense of virtue, that missionary sense, that pastoral sense. So anyway, one of the things we can say this is to find God in the Salesian tradition is really strong. And I put that because when you talk to the Society of Jesus, they will always ask you, a Jesuit priest will always say, how are you looking for God in your daily life? Where is God in your life? Have you found Jesus? Well, Francis de Sales says you can find Jesus in your everyday life. So what are some core elements? Well, for Salesians, where do we find God? By intensely loving and educating young people. We find this in Don Bosco. We find it in Mother Mazzarello. We find it in our own experience. The more we worked with young people and they challenge us to bring them to Jesus, the more we realize that we need to find Jesus. So we don't just talk about things to the young, we talk about God, but we need to find God. So the young people, we discover God by intensely loving and educating young people, as Don Bosco did, as Mother Mazzarello did, as Don Rua did, as all the great Salesian saints have done. And this is what it is. So it's finding God in everyday life in the young. For Francis de Sales, holiness is found in the everyday. But I told you already that for him, he realizes people are afraid of the word holiness or sanctity. That is a very frightening word for many people in his time, because they say, oh, I'm not that good. I could never be a saint. I could never be holy. I just hope I can get into heaven. If I just stand inside the doorway of heaven, I'll be happy. They had this sense that it was so difficult to get into heaven because holiness was a frightening, difficult thing for them. And so he does not often use the word holiness. He uses other words. And here are the words he uses. The first one is devotion or devotedness. The second one is gentleness. And the third one is daily life, daily life. Let's look at how this comes for him. All right, let's look first of all in this. And his language, realize this, His language is very ordinary. Now, Francis was very intelligent. He had gone to the best two universities in Europe at the time, the first one being Paris and an even better one being Padua. He was highly educated. He had two doctorates. He was a doctor of civil law, a doctor of canon law, but he was also a doctor of letters, of literature. So really highly educated. And yet when he speaks to people, he uses very simple, ordinary language. And so this is it. His idea is you approach God and you approach neighbor. To love God and to love neighbor, it's one thrust of love, one thrust of charity. He avoids even using religious terms, but he uses very ordinary language. So even though he's a bishop, you could say that his language is closer to the language in the kitchen than it is in the cathedral. Well, let's see what words he uses. And the first one is devotion. For him, devotion is the normal and ordinary sense of family. This idea, devotion, is very dynamic, devotedness or devotion. And so he has a sense, it's a family word. Devotedness is highly relational. A mother is devoted to her children. Parents are devoted to their children. Children learn to love each other, learn to love their parents, learn to love their country, love their city. They learn to be devoted. Don Bosco talks about being honest citizens and good Christians. It's that devoted to be a good citizen. So Don Bosco speaks in that way. In fact, Don Bosco uses the word devotion a lot as well. And so when you look at this, it's you have a duty and you're born of duty. And so because of this duty, that's where your devotedness comes in. So duty is solemn and difficult, but if you love, duty becomes sweet. And love strengthens your devotedness. We can say this, that the word devotion or devotedness expresses that love grows. You make progress in charity, in love. And so while many talk about the perfection, a life of perfection, Francis says, yes, perfection is the perfection of charity, the perfection of love. For him, devotion is a synonym for holiness. So instead of saying holiness, he says devotion or devotedness. Instead of saying Christian perfection, he says perfection of charity, perfection of Christian life. And the word devotedness embraces asceticism and mysticism. In other words, you could say in his time, they talked about asceticism, following Jesus as a disciple. That's asceticism, being serious about following Jesus. And of course, asceticism was not invented by Christians. We know the Buddhists have asceticism. We know that the Jews have asceticism. So that's really being staunch, being observant in your religious duty, or for a Christian, being a good disciple. And it's a discipline. Asceticism is a discipline. So asceticism, akesis, is the Greek. You could say discipline is the Latin, disciple. Mysticism is that entering into the mystery of God. So in his times, people talked about you're first an ascetic, you're first a disciple, and then you enter into union with God, into the mystery of God, asceticism, mysticism. Today, we talk about spirituality. So we use the one word spirituality. And for Francis, he didn't use the word spirituality because it did not exist yet. There's no such word as spirituality in his lifetime, but he uses the word devotion as we would use the word spirituality. Now, in looking at it, what can we say about devotion? We can say this. It is family language. So devotion is who we are. And what we do, we take care of our family, we take care of our children. And so this is what every family does. Salesians take care of the young people, being dedicated to them. That's devotion. That's who we are. But also, devotion is about freedom. It is free in the sense that you do not pay for devotion. It's free. It costs nothing. It's the word free, but it's also freeing. It's liberating. It opens you up to greater good and greater love. And so devotion means that we accept others, but we also accept ourselves. Whatever is free is not forced. Oh, the rector major this year said, do everything by love and nothing by force. Where does he get that? That's a saying of Francis de Sales. And that comes from this idea of devotion. Do it to free, not to force. Love. Don't constrain people. And do not be afraid to love. All right, that's the first word, devotion. The second word is sweetness, or in French, the word is douceur. So I use that because I'm using a D word. Devotion in English, douceur in French means sweetness. That's the second word. So, but sweetness or douceur is bigger than what we can say in English. So you've got to think of what do you say in Mandarin, what do you say in Cantonese? All right. Douceur means sweetness. So like honey. Francis, in the introduction to the devout life, in the door of virtue, talks about the sweetness of honey. He talks about honey many times. He talks about honeybees many times. So there's that kind of sweetness, you taste it. But also the word douceur means gentleness. You're gentle with people. It's mildness. That is, you can be easygoing. You don't take offense easily. You are able to get along with everybody, even people who are difficult to get along with. That's the mildness. Douceur, that's a sweetness. It is also approachability. People need you and they're afraid to come and talk to you. So we try to be approachable. We try. And you don't know why people don't come to you. I was just at our provincial chapter, and one of the younger Salesians who I taught came up to me and he said, I used to be afraid of you because you're so smart. And I said, you don't know me, I'm not smart. But I find that you're good to talk to. He said this to me. I've known him for 10 years. So finally he said, you're easy to talk to. Oh, thank you. So I don't know what impression I gave him, but he was afraid because he thought I was too smart for him, which is strange. It's so strange. So how do we make ourselves approachable? You try to make yourself approachable. And sometimes you don't even know that people are afraid to come to you. And so that's where Francis says, more sweetness, more approachability. Now, I say this because his one word, douceur, there's 4 different words in English. I don't know how many words there are in your languages, so think about it. But think about this sweetness as honey. You taste it, you joy in honey, you are nourished by it, you are encouraged by it. Think of honey. Honey is something that if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to use it. It has a wonderful taste. But you know, when you open up a jar of honey, suddenly everything is sticky. You're real careful. You pour out some honey, you put it in your tea or you put it on bread, and then suddenly there's honey all over your fingers. And you say, how did I do that? I was so careful. What happened? Why is everything sticky? And so some people say, I'm not going to eat any honey because it makes a mess. Well, children don't care if it's a mess. They love the taste. They love licking their fingers. They're not afraid of the sweetness of honey or the stickiness of honey. And Francis says this to us to say, you have to enjoy honey. You have to enjoy this quality of sweetness, but you have to work at it. It's not easy. And if you don't work at it, the bees work at it. You know, you can get sugarcane or fruit and they're sweet as soon as it's ripe. but honey takes a long time to produce and many honeybees to produce it. And they all have to work, and they have to work together. It doesn't come automatically. And so this is what he says about inner sweetness. You got to work at it because it just doesn't come automatically. So you need that kind of thing. He also says, we take sweetness for granted. We don't think it's anything special, just like we think honey is not very special because you could put it on your supper table. You could put it on your table in your home, in your dining room, and you see it every day. You use a little bit every day. You look to provide for it. If you're the one buying food, you look, okay, is there a sale on honey? We look for it. This happened certainly in the Alps where Francis was from. Everybody had honey on their table every day. They did not have sugar. They had honey. And so this is what he says. It's so everyday that maybe you don't notice it, but it's important. So this idea of sweetness is soft and gradual. So how do we promote this sweetness? By how do we speak? He says sweetness speaks about the disciple and watchful patience. And so he points us out to look at Jesus, the good shepherd, the boy Jesus who goes to the temple and talks to all the doctors of the law. And they are saying, what a brilliant young boy. And what a gentle young boy, what an interested young boy. Here are all these rabbis and professors, and they're taken by the gentleness of the boy Jesus. And when his mother and father come in and they say, we were looking for you, why did you go away? He says, how did you not know I would be here? There's a sweet answer. It's gentle. Jesus is always kind and gentle. And Jesus says, learn of me, for I am meek and humble of heart. And Francis goes back to this image of Jesus, the good shepherd, Jesus, the heart of Jesus, Sacred Heart. And we need to, that's where we learn sweetness from. So if the first word is devotion, devotedness, the second word is sweetness, and it ultimately comes from Jesus. And so this is gentleness. So gentleness, meek and humble of heart, approachable, compliant with others, intentional, cheerful and forbearing, ascetic, simple and spirited, full of spirit. All right, the third word is daily life, which in French is one word. In English, it's two words. In Italian, it's one word, quotidiano. In English, it's two words. So sorry, but anyway, for him, it's one word. So your daily life, your daily experience has to be sweet and devoted. You work a life that opens you up to others and to God. Think of the woman caught in adultery, treated so harshly by the leaders of the law and religion, and they throw her down in front of Jesus, expecting him to condemn her, and he writes in the sand, and then he speaks to her gently. Has no one condemned you? When they all go away, has no one condemned you? He speaks very gently. No one can hear him, only him. That's that gentleness. He respects her dignity, he gives her back dignity. And so it's in that daily encounter, that gentleness. And we can say this about it. Daily life is the normal, the everyday. So Francis, when he talks about virtue, he talks about the little virtues like modesty and simplicity, a hidden life. He talks about duty, that is commitment and attachment to devotion. And so for him, the virtues are the little virtues of daily life. Anyone can live those little virtues, and everyone is called to it. You notice sometimes with animals how they react very quickly to children, whereas adults, oftentimes the animal will stand its guard, but children in their simplicity, the animal reacts. And so Francis talks about it in that way. It's that little gentle virtue. And so what he says is, keep it simple. Francis, I told you, was teaching priests in his own house. And he began that actually for 3 years solid. Every day during the winter, he would teach them theology. And at a certain point, when he's teaching morality, he talks to the priest about virtues. And he says, you need to study which virtue you're going to have. And during the break, after they taught for about an hour, they took a little break, and one of the young priests comes up to him and he says, oh, my bishop, your words were so good for me. I love to hear it because I need to practice virtue. I don't have any virtue. Where do I start? And Francis says, oh, well, start with one virtue. And so here's the priest. He takes his little book and he takes his pen. He starts to write, okay, one virtue. Which virtue? Francis says, no. Be very calm, Father, very calm. Choose one. Yes, my bishop, which virtue? And he's getting all worked up. And so Francis says, no, you need to be simple. So I recommend to you the virtue of patience. Yes, patience. Okay, I will practice patience. How long do I practice patience? You practice it every day. Every day? For how long, Father? For a year. Every day and what other virtue? No, Father. Just practice virtue of patience every day for 1 year. And the priest looks at him surprised and he says, what? Only the virtue of patience every day for a year? And Francis says, yes, Father, only patience every day for a year. But my bishop, if I practice only patience at the end of the year, I'll have only one virtue. And Francis says, very good, because right now you have no virtues. Start with one virtue. Practice it every day for the year. For Francis, he gives importance to the little things, to those desires to love God. Well, we have to grow those desires. And he says it's like planting a garden. But don't worry about what other people are planting. What's in your garden? What are the plants that you grow? What are the vegetables that you grow? And take care of them and weed them and dig around them so they can grow better, so that they get sun. They're not blocked. The sun is not blocked, so they can become as sweet as they can be. So this is what virtues have to be. Grow them in your own garden of your heart. But don't try to plant any virtue in somebody else's garden. Grow them in your own. In other words, don't worry about what other people are doing. Worry what you're doing. These are the little virtues, the unseen virtues. And so for him, little virtues are essential. So what are these virtuous essentials? So I'm quoting him now as he is writing to a priest. And he's saying, you need to be graceful in your condescension to the tiresome tempers of neighbors. To a woman who writes to him, and he writes to her about virtue, and he says, you need to be cheerful in bearing with your own perfections and your own disadvantage out of love of your own lowliness. So you feel, oh, I don't have many virtues. Okay, embrace that. Embrace your lowliness and love it. Love your imperfection and be cheerful about it. Don't get all worked up about virtue. Oh, I've got to practice this virtue. No, be gentle with yourself. And if you're gentle with yourself, you can be good-humored and gentle with others, putting up with the small acts of selfishness and injustice that others inflict on you. So all three of these phrases are from Francis de Sales. Good humor and putting up with the small acts of selfishness and injustice from others. Then you grow in the little virtues. What do you need for that? A gentle voice, an agreeable manner of answering those who speak disagreeably to us, a pleasant manner of receiving a refusal. You ask somebody a favor and they refuse it. All right, Be pleasant in accepting the refusal. Gratitude and politeness when others oblige us. When I was young, I thought this idea, when people refuse me, I thought of the superior when I asked permission, and if he would say yes or say no. I have to say that most often he said yes, but I was always worried. What if he says no? Will I be able to receive that gently and pleasantly? Well, let me tell you this. Once I became a rector, I realized I get a lot more refusals than I ever got from a rector myself. Well, ask a brother for something or to do something, and he'll tell me no. Often, usually happens a lot. The rectors in the room will know that. So, but here's what Francis, so he's talking as bishop. How many refusals did he receive from his own priests? So he was gentle in receiving a refusal. But when someone obliged him and said, yes, my bishop, I'll do that, he was very gracious and full of gratitude, and he thanked them. I remember when I was in practical training, my rector, Father Louis was his name, Father Louis Liberati, who died young, died at 51 years old. But Father Louis, when I was a cleric in practical training, I was coming in every day. I was running the recreation of the boys outside on the field in the springtime. I was in Canada. So the snow had melted. We were outside running 3 different games at once, and I would go make sure they were all having their good time, playing safely. And then when it was time, the bell rang, I would make sure they all came in and get inside the building, because even though it was spring, it would start to get real cold. It would go below freezing. So I'd get them in quickly, and then they get cleaned up and get ready for their study time. And I was bringing them in day after day and calling them there and getting them through the door. And I was getting very worried. Am I getting them on time? Got to get them there, get them cleaned up so they can go and do their studies. These were 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. Father Louis would stand by the door, and he'd stand there and cross his arms and go like this, kind of nod his head as the boys came in, and he'd frown. He was very funny and very sweet, but he'd always frown. I never knew why he frowned when the kids were, so he was acting like he was growling. And so they're all coming in, they go, good afternoon, Father Louis, good afternoon, Father Louis, good afternoon, Father Louis. They all loved him. And some of them would like, hit him in the arm the way Canadian kids do. Hi, Father Louis, hurry up, don't give Brother Joe trouble. And I come in and bring the last one in, and somebody would forget a shirt, someone would forget the ball, I'd carry them in. And then he said to me he says, thank you, Brother Joe, in front of all the kids. I go, you're welcome, Father. And the next day, thank you, Brother Joe. Father, why are you thanking me? I'm thanking you because you are taking care of these boys with dedication. And I was so surprised. That's what I was supposed to do. That was the assignment. There's no reason to thank me. That was my duty. He thanked me. You better believe I did much better the next day. His gentleness and his politeness and his gratitude to me, that was a Francis de Sales virtue. And so this is what it means to be Salesian. And we can say this, at the core of everything, at the heart of everything is our relationships. We have a spirituality that is full of people. So that's why everything must be done with love. And it's more important to love than to fear. This is what Francis de Sales says. And this is, you could say, the core of those 3 words. Devotedness, gentleness, every day, and our relationships. So if we can understand that, we can understand what is the Salesian spirituality. I hope this is helpful for you. And so I put these key words because whenever you read Francis, you'll see him often repeat these words, often talk about honey, often talk about gentleness, of sweetness, of every day. And that's the core of everything that he teaches and what Don Bosco takes from him. So I hope this will be useful to all of you.
Thank you, Father, for your sharing. So the three words, devotedness, gentleness, and a relationship. So
everyday relationship.
Every day. So I hope it will be helpful for our reflection and also for our sharing of the day in the afternoon session. So thank you once again, Father Joe, and we will wait for the Wednesday homily.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome. God blessings to everybody.